In this video, I will show you one of the biggest reasons people blunder in chess. It's white to play in this position, black just played the move f3. They are threatening checkmate in one with queen g2, and you must find the only way to survive for white in this position. And you will avoid the blunder in the process. Okay? Folks, you're a great player if you found the only move rook h2 in this position. Rook h2 simply stops the checkmate in one, and white keeps a small edge in this position with an extra bishop for 3 pawns. What was wrong with the move rook g1? Imagine you came up with a candidate rook g1. It looks like I'm both stopping the checkmate while also hitting your queen on g4. Rook g1 looks like a much more active and multi-purpose move at first sight, don't you think? Yeah, you gain tempo on the queen, you guard against the checkmate threat, life looks beautiful. So please start from here. What is the drawback of the move rook g1? And that's the key question you must ask yourself in today's episode, but in general when you play chess. The drawback of the move rook g1, folks, is it unprotects the h3 square. Can you see it? Rook g1 invites queen h3 check. Ouch! And the next move, you get mated with queen g2. Please focus on the rook g1 move and what it no longer does. Today's episode will be totally about seeing the secondary order effects, namely what our move no longer does or no longer protects in that position. This is the secret sauce of stopping blunders in chess, and yet it goes against human intuition, right? Because we humans, when we play chess or when we act in life, we tend to look at our actions as if in a positive light. We tend to look at actions that does something, right? The rook does attack the queen while also stopping a checkmate in one threat, right? You tend to focus on all the positive things that your move does, and in that process, you're ignoring what that move no longer does. What that move no longer does, it no longer controls the h3 square and invites queen h3 check. Besides, the move no longer does is it no longer leaves the g1 escape square for your king. So after queen h3 check, the king can no longer escape via g1. It's all because of your active looking move rook g1. Please understand this, folks. This is a beautiful position to illustrate my main point in today's episode. People blunder because they tend to completely ignore the drawback of their own move. So the key question, bigger question to reduce blunders in chess is you must ask yourself, what am I unprotecting if I make this move? That's almost always a great question. Besides, in this position, we need to ask ourselves, am I allowing a check to my opponent if I make this move, right? Why? Because your king is exposed. Whenever your king is exposed, has no pawn cover, stuck in the center, that question becomes even more crucial to ask yourself. As a result of my next move, am I allowing a check? Indeed, that's the only check that you love to black if you make the rook g1. It's not rocket science. You don't talk about 10 different checks to calculate. There's only one check available to black as a result of your very own move. Blunder is defined in my book as your very move gives a winning tactic to the opponent. This is different than simply seeing the threat as a result of their move. Of course, you always start from seeing the threat, right? They play f3. The first question is, what is their next move if I don't make a move right now? And the blunder is, as a result of my very move, am I allowing a winning tactic to the opponent? Yes, your very move changes the situation, invites queen h3 check, a game-winning check indeed. Indeed, if you ask yourself this question, am I allowing a devastating check to the opponent, then you conclude that rook h2 is much safer because you're controlling both of these checking squares, right? That's why rook h2 is so simple, because there's not even like a single check to calculate in this position. I mean, there's only one check, but that just drops the queen for nothing, right? One more example to highlight this point, folks. White just took on e5 with the pawn on f4. The question is, should black recapture with the bishop or with the pawn on d6? Okay? Two-choice task. A beautiful two-choice task waiting for you. Please ask yourself this question. What am I unprotecting if I make this move? This will be the key. This will be the key question to reduce this blunder, to stop the blunder which actually happened in the real game. All right? Please ask yourself, what is being unprotected if I make this move? Yes, folks. You see, if you only focus on the bishop activity on g7, it looks like, yes, I want to take back with the bishop. The bishop remains to be an active piece on that square. I don't want to blunt my king's Indian bishop by taking back with the pawn. But can you see, as a result of f takes e5, the knight has become a loose piece. Why? Because attacked once by the bishop, guard only once by your bishop on g7. This is the first observation that you should start this position, right? Loose pieces are the pieces that have equal number of attackers and defenders. In this case, the knight has one attacker and only one defender. This makes this knight on h6 a loose piece. And most blunders happen because people either ignore the loose pieces or turn a loose piece into a hanging piece as a result of their very move. This will change after my upcoming Blunder Check course, folks. It's coming soon. Well, if you take this way, then the knight remains to be protected by the bishop. The knight doesn't become a hanging piece and black is in the game. In the actual game, unfortunately, bishop takes e5 happened and well, you're losing the knight on h6. You're turning your loose knight into a hanging knight as a result of your very move. Please notice this, folks. This is when blunders happen. People ignore secondary order effects of their very move. You should first of all observe the knight as a loose piece, and this requires vigilance, right? Ask yourself this question. Don't only look at the bright side of your moves. Yes, the bishop is active, attacks everything. What is the bishop move no longer does? That's the question. That's the question, right? And again, it goes against human tendencies. As we live in life, we are bombarded by information that confirms our existing beliefs, right? We don't challenge ourselves in real life when we are navigating the world. You look at the YouTube algorithm bombarding you with information that just confirms your ideas all the time. But chess requires full objectivity, a scientific mindset. You must always double check your moves in the lens of, okay, I see all the things this move does, but what are the things that this move no longer does? This position also shows us the importance of good board vision, right? Like, for example, seeing the bishop is now putting pressure on that knight is the key, and also focus on the recent changes, right? What are all the recent changes as a result of the opponent's last move? Of course, now your knight actually became a loose piece. That's beautiful, right? Here in this position, guys, the knight is attacked 0 times, guarded once by the bishop. The knight is a protected piece right now. The moment white takes on e5, the knight is becoming a loose piece because it's one attacker and one defender right now. So care is required. LPDO principle. Loose pieces drop off in chess. That's the reason. The moment you see the bishop putting pressure on the knight, then this is not an option for black at all, right? Your options are limited in this case. You must take back with the pawn. White is slightly better, but black is in the game. One more beautiful example, folks. White has an extra pawn in this position with 2 connected pass pawns on the queen side. Now the rook is attacking the pawn on d5, okay? So the question is, should white play the move bishop c6 to protect the pawn on d5? That was the game continuation. Please tell me whether that's a good move or a blunder, okay? Folks, in the actual game, bishop c6 happens because white only focuses on the things that the bishop does. The bishop goes to c6. Why? Because the bishop guards the pawn on d5. If you capture my bishop, then thank you so much for giving me 3 connected pass pawns on the queen side. White is completely winning this position. White focuses on the good ideas behind their move. White never asks themselves, what is the drawback of the move bishop c6? What am I unprotecting if I make that move? Please ask yourself that question right now, folks. Please. And now you talk about knight fork alignments. I have a separate chapter in my Blunder Check course on knight forks and how to tame the knight in chess. Notice the knight is on the same color as your rook and the king. This invites knight forks in chess. And you see the square c4 is becoming a loose square. It's becoming a hanging square if you play the move bishop c6. The bishop c6 move directly unguards the c4 square and invites knight c4 fork, and the game is completely finished in this position. King c2, nothing changes. The knight still captures the rook while also guarding the rook on d1, and black is completely winning with the next rook in its position. Please notice this, folks. This bishop and the knight geometry, it's called Karpov distance, by the way. The bishop was dominating the knight right now. Your very move allows a winning tactic for your opponent. It's all about understanding the second order effects of your move. What am I unprotecting if I make this move could prevent white from making this devastating blunder. Notice, folks, in this case, we are talking about particular empty square that becomes an unprotected or a hanging square. In the last position, we were talking about a loose knight that became a hanging knight as a result of your very move. In this case, we are talking about the empty square that was loose. Why? Because it's attacked once right now and guarded only once by the bishop. Why is the square even relevant? Well, because of the alignment that allows a knight fork. This also involves good tactical eye, of course. And as a result of your next move, you directly turn that square into a hanging square. And yes, you can talk about hanging squares in chess as well. Just like you talk about hanging pieces, square c4 is hanging as a result of white's very move. Instead of bishop c6, rook h3 will be a great move, avoiding knight fork alignment just in case, while also putting pressure on the pawn on h7. If they take on d5, white simply eliminates that final pawn, and white is still winning with two connected passed pawns on the queen side. This is a beautiful example that will touch tunnel vision as well, folks. In the course, I talk about different mechanisms that cause chess blunders. The question for black is this: is this pawn on d5 safe to capture by the knight? Is knight takes d5 a safe move or a blunder? Namely, are you allowing a devastating tactic to white if you make this move? Please stop the video, go through the variations, and tell me the answer. Folks, knight takes d5 is a devastating blunder. Why? Is it because of queen takes d4 or some other move? First things first, knight takes d5 is creating a loose knight because that knight will be hit once and guarded only once by your queen, which means care is required. Plus, as I mentioned, your king is still in the center of the board. You have developmental problems. In those cases, the letter C becomes crucial in our checklist. As a result of my next move, am I allowing a check to the opponent, right? Because your king is still stuck in the center of the board. Vigilance is required. Please ask yourself this question, folks. Knight takes d5 allows a devastating check indeed, and the check is queen a4. Queen a4 became available as a result of your very move. Notice that. The knight was guarding a4. As a result of your very move, you're unprotecting a4 and inviting queen a4 check. And can you see why that's such a devastating check for us? Yes, folks, because now you have to cover this check with queen d7, and after the queen trade, your knight on d5 is turning into a hanging piece. Please visualize. I won't put them on the board. Please visualize from this position. Knight takes d5, queen a4 check, queen d7 only move, takes, bishop takes d5, white won a piece for nothing, and white is winning. Can you see the beautiful part of this? That you could have stopped this blunder by reminding yourself of the things your move no longer does. Also, black was only focusing on the reaction of queen takes d4. If white goes ahead and grabs that pawn, then black is very happy because e6 guards the knight on d5, also activates the bishop. Black has no major problems whatsoever in this position. Black is in the game. Black was tunneling on this idea before they grabbed the pawn. You see, we have to open up our minds for other options for our opponents as well. Namely, checks should be checked first, especially if the king is still stuck in the center of the board. That becomes important. Also here, the king has not many squares to escape this check, you see. It's also about mobility restrictions because queen a4 only leaves you with a single option, right? Queen d7, and direct effect of your move turns this knight into a hanging knight. White is completely winning. Going back to this first position, folks, it's a very peculiar and instructive example, don't you think? Because you see, first things first, you're creating a loose piece. If you take that pawn, your king is still stuck in the center, and you're turning this loose square on a4 into a hanging square, right? It was attacked once, guarded only once by the knight. The moment you move the knight, there is no more control on a4. And it's black's responsibility to check for this. And that's why chess is hard, because it's black's task to not only look at all the things the move does, but also all the things the move no longer does. The knight was controlling these two squares. The moment you move the knight, there is no control on c4 or a4 squares. a4 is very relevant because it allows a check and your king is stuck in the center, and your knight on d5 is also a loose piece. You see? So in this case, we saw two big defects of the move knight takes d5. The knight takes d5 move created a loose piece. The knight on d5 is a loose piece right now, and also allowed a devastating check to white. Two big problems, but black was only tulling on the reaction queen takes d4 to justify their move. You see? It's a beautiful segment of short calculation. It's not like deep 10-ply calculation to understand this blunder, right? The moment you put it on the board, the moment you play queen a4, everything becomes obvious that you're completely gone in this position. There are no reactions. There is nothing left. And that's exactly why chess is difficult, because a single blunder like this can turn any position into a defeat. Another instructive position for you folks. In this case, white just took on c8 with their rook. You have, let's say, 3 different ways to recapture the rook on c8. What if I told you there is one clearly winning solution for black and maybe 2 kind of mistakes that you should avoid, okay? And one is like a clear blunder, okay? So go through the steps we talked about today. What am I unprotecting if I make this move would be handy to avoid the blunder in this case. Folks, start with the most principled move. Which move seems very strong and desirable for black in this position? Of course, that's rook takes c8, right? Because you're occupying the only open file as a result. You will dominate the only open file with your rook. So the hand wants to play rook takes c8. But if you only trust your hand and intuition, then blunders are waiting for you in the corner. You always have to justify your desirable moves using concrete blunder check process. Ask yourself, what are you unprotecting if you make this move? What was that rook doing before but not anymore? That's the key. Board vision, folks. Can you see? Bishop g4 check will be allowed at that point. That rook was controlling g4. The moment you go rook c8, huge blunder, you also invite this skewer bishop g4. Notice, your very move also creates an alignment on this diagonal. That's a secondary weakness of your move rook c8. You invite bishop g4 check and you lose the exchange, and the game is in white's favor suddenly. Yes, white gets a small advantage after knight d6. They have an extra exchange plus a protected passed pawn on d5. Of course, black as the bishop pair might have some fighting chances, but you lost the chance to get a winning position. Also important, guys, can you see? Rook c8 only invites one check to white. White can only give one check to you if you make the move rook takes c8. And that's bishop g4 check. There's nothing else. There's nothing else. There's no check to calculate, only bishop g4, and yet it turns out to be a devastating check. It's all because of your very move that gave this option to white. That's why that's a blunder in my book. Now, if you take back with the king, guys, can you tell me which move you're inviting white to make in that position? Yes, you're inviting knight d6 check, right? Because that king was controlling d6. The moment you take on c8, no more control on the d6 square. You're also inviting knight d6, come with tempo. That knight was on the verge of getting trapped. In fact, suddenly that knight is awakened. It even attacks your pawn on f7, not to mention they can always take on b7 as well. So both options are good here for white. So this leaves us with only a single winning move, bishop takes c8. You don't invite any check as a result. The knight is in a knight check shadow distance against your king, which is a very safe distance. The knight cannot go forward because your king keeps controlling these two squares. Well, the knight has no retreat moves in this position. Where is that knight going? Only move is knight a7. Looks like a ridiculous move indeed. And black takes over the game, even with moves like king d6, avoiding the alignment, stopping the d5 pawn, and inviting this trade, which only gives black a winning positional advantage because your rook occupies the only open file and black has an extra pawn with a winning endgame. So you see, this example showed us the combination of letters C and A. As a result of your rook c8 move, you invited a check, but also you created an alignment yourself. Your very move created this diagonal alignment on that diagonal between your heavy pieces and directly led to this winning tactic for white. You see, if you only focus on the good things behind your moves, rook c8 looks beautiful, I take over the open file, I will dominate this game, I'll just win this game easily, then blunders are waiting for you in the corner. You're ignoring that key question. What am I unprotecting if I make this move? That's almost always a great question to ask yourself in chess, because in any moment, if you slip this question, like in this case, the game can turn from a complete winning move to a complete disaster. This will be your homework position, folks. White played the move knight a4 here, hitting your bishop on b6. Do you think bishop c7 is a good move, or should black play the move knight c4? Okay, I'll give you two choices. Please ask yourself these questions. What am I unprotecting if I make this move? What is the potential defect of my very move? And then you'll arrive in the right solution. Okay? This will consolidate what we talked about in today's episode. Black has an extra pawn in his position. That might also be a relevant information for you. Okay? Bishop c7 or knight c4. As in life and in chess, every move is a drawback. It's all about trade-offs, give and take. There is not a perfect move that only gives you beautiful things without even having defects. Every single move in chess has some defect. My Blunder Check course, there will be dedicated chapters on this very question of what am I unprotecting if I make this move. I will give you how you can create hanging pieces in chess. I will describe in depth loose pieces, loose squares, hanging pieces, and loose pieces as well. And all these checklist questions like C, L, A, M, P, the clamp checklist is waiting for you in the actual course that will drill of all the potential defects of our very next move, and thus will become blunder proof. We'll reduce those blunders drastically, folks. This requires real training because, as I said, there are so many processes that goes against human nature. Confirmation bias, wishful thinking, focusing on the things that does in our position and not on the things that no longer does. That's very hard for humans to grasp, right? You make a bishop move, you attack something, and you ignore what that bishop move unprotects. It's hard. That's why chess is a hard game, and yet we must do this training because a single mistake at any point in the game can cause a defeat. Chess is the most cruel sport out there. Think about that. There is no cushion like in basketball. If you're up 50 points, then LeBron James can sit on the bench, right, on the final quarter. Or Luka Doncic. You don't need him if you're like up 45 points. But in chess, folks, a single slip at any point in the game can turn a victory into a defeat. So this needs specific and guided training. And these questions for beginners are not automatized. So that's why I'm giving you structured checklists, guiding questions to reduce the number of those blunders. As you practice those, you will automatize the process. You don't need additional conscious checklist processes as you drill and go over those exercises. You repeat by asking good questions, using useful and instructive puzzles. That's why I will give you 350 instructive positions that I crafted across one full year of preparation of this course. I'm very hopeful about the impact of this course on you. It's coming soon. Please check it out once it's published. And please give me feedback also. Do you also suffer from same kind of blunders in terms of thought process? Were these puzzles difficult for you? For the very same reason that I mentioned, scientists don't look at confirming evidence, but they actively seek for counter evidence to their hypothesis. You must become a scientist to become a blunder-proof chess player. See you soon.